Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be running through my first free hit draft ahead of Game Week 34. So then, like many of you out there this week, I am also on a free hit ahead of Game Week 34, but I don't want this video just to be relevant to free hitters. Hopefully, if you're just using free transfers, or even if you're on a wild card, at least bits of this video will be relevant to you as well. Of course, though, I am going to be running through my free hit draft in its current form ahead of Game Week 34. I'm recording it on Monday, so plenty can change. And because of that, I'm also going to have a look at some of my favoured alternatives, particularly in midfield and up front, because there are a lot of different options there that I like the look of, and I don't want to rule myself out of them by the time we get to Thursday or Friday, or even come the deadline in Game Week 34. And also, because there are a lot of free hit drafts out there right now, I think it's valuable to look at some of the wider alternatives and not just pigeonhole down a path where there's 16 or 17 players that all of us are looking at, because you're going to probably see quite a number of videos this week. I want to give a few different options to hopefully help you make your mind up yourself. I want to start off with goalkeepers and defenders as a combined section, because a lot of the goalkeepers will change depending on which defenders you've got in and vice versa. Now, currently, I don't have a Newcastle defender, and because of that, I've gone with Nick Pope in goal. Now, Pope probably isn't the ideal player to have from a Newcastle point of view ahead of Game Week 34, but there are other defenders that I really like the look of with plenty of attacking acumen that I don't want to sacrifice for the sakes of a Livramento or a Shah or maybe even a Trippier, or let alone a Dan Burn, because I think that the three that I've currently got all have relatively good attacking threat, better than some of the options like a Shah, like a Livramento. Although Livramento has been very attacking recently, so I'm not ruling that out. And a lot of my decisions in terms of my goalkeeper and defense will come down to whether or not I value Livramento or Shah's attacking threat ahead of some of the alternatives I'm looking at in defense at the moment. For now, though, I definitely want to cover off the Newcastle clean sheets, and therefore Pope gets in goal. Although I don't expect loads of saves, Ipswich do have some attacking threat. I would say more so than the other two promoted sides, Southampton and Leicester. So I don't think it's a banker to be relying on a Newcastle clean sheet, but I'm not confident enough of betting against it that I'd like to go without Newcastle altogether. So Pope, at the very least, solidifies that clean sheet if they were to keep one. And on the bench, I've gone with Verbruggen. Now, I don't want to talk too much about my bench goalkeeper, because honestly, Verbruggen probably isn't getting in ahead of a Newcastle goalkeeper, or maybe even a Sarr with Wolves, or a Leno against Southampton for Fulham as well. I think any of those probably come in ahead of Verbruggen, but I don't want to rule myself out of other options in those teams. Whereas with Brighton, West Ham aren't scoring many goals, and there aren't a lot of other Brighton options that I want to include in my free hit, so it wouldn't be locking me out of those options by having Verbruggen on the bench. So it's not a bad player to have if he needs to step in case of an injury to Pope, but I don't expect to start him, and I'd probably be picking a different keeper if I went instead of Pope, because I probably still wouldn't start Verbruggen. Hopefully that makes sense. But on to the defense. I currently have Trent in there. Now, this is the big risk, I would say, on my free hit draft. He hasn't started the game recently. He's obviously been out injured. There's massive question marks around his contract situation as well, whether or not he's going to stay at Liverpool. It looks pretty unlikely he is, but he came off the bench. He scored the winner against Leicester, and I don't think anyone would say that he's not still passionate about Liverpool. He wants to win the league with them, and this game against Spurs at home is their golden opportunity to win the league at home in front of a captive audience for the first time in the Premier League. Obviously, they've won the league before, but that was during the COVID season where they couldn't have a live audience to celebrate with them. So I think Trent, being a homegrown talent as well, is going to want to celebrate in front of the fans, and he is better than Bradley. And I think as long as Trent is fully fit, he should be the player that starts at right back in such an important game, the game that, again, would crown them Premier League champions. Slot is probably going to want to start his best right back there. That is Trent, although Bradley does obviously have his benefits. He's a very good player in his own right. Trent is the senior right back, and I think if he's fully fit, he starts. But that is the question mark, whether or not he's going to be fully fit or not. So I will keep my eye on the training photos, on the press conferences. If I have a feeling that Trent is fit enough to start the game, I think I want to go there because the upside, if he does start, is huge. He's got much more upside than almost any other defender in the game and has done for several seasons now. And there is a bit of romance there as well, that if he can be the one to get them over the line against Spurs in front of their fans, I think that's going to be a really big deal for him. So again, a little bit of a romance pick there, a little bit of a narrative, but I do like Trent. He could be a player that comes out if I don't feel confident enough that he does actually start the game, though. Also, Spurs could score. They are going to rotate, you would think, ahead of their Europa League semi-final the following midweek, but they still do have a pretty good amount of attacking threat. So maybe it's not the best chance of a clean sheet, although Liverpool's defensive data has been very good and Spurs also haven't been very good. So I do still like Trent for all of those reasons, but he's not a lock on this free hit. Moving over to Aït-Nouri, I probably don't need to spend too long on him. It's at home to Leicester, who haven't been scoring many goals recently whatsoever, although they did just score 2 against Brighton away from home last time out in an away fixture anyway. They haven't been scoring at home. They look very blunt up front, and Wolves have actually been in very good form as well recently. Aït-Nouri, particularly from an attacking point of view, has been impressive all season long. I think he's on a 10 attacking returns now. So again, an absolute lock on a free hit for me. I won't be removing him unless there's some sort of injury. And then finally, Sessegnon will be very popular in a lot of drafts, especially at the start of the week. I think people will get a bit nervous about his expected minutes by the time we get to the end of the week and we're actually locking in the free hits. And I probably will do a little bit as well. But the right winger against Southampton all season long has feasted. And I can tell you that as a Southampton fan, that is a very good position to be targeting. And not only has Sessegnon been getting good minutes, but he's also 4.1 million and playing right wing out of position for Fulham in what is a very good fixture. So I think the upside is there to take the risk on the minutes. Harry Wilson is coming back from injury, so there's a risk that Sessegnon comes out, but his minutes recently have been pretty good. He started a few in a row now. He got taken off a couple of weeks ago by accident, and they couldn't reverse the decision. So I think his minutes have actually been deceptively low, when actually they should have been a little bit higher. And again, there's no reason to take him out of the side after a really good performance in game week 33. Southampton next up. It's a great fixture. He's playing way out of position right wing for Fulham against a very bad Southampton side who are already relegated. They have shown a little bit of something since they got relegated, but it's still a great fixture. And I think Sessegnon is one of those sort of upside picks that you can get on a free hit for 1 week. And he's so cheap that it enables a lot of other stuff in your free hit 11 as well. That being said, I don't think he's a must-have on a free hit. The minutes are a little bit shaky. And perhaps if you wanted to be a bit more secure on the minutes, you could reverse Pope and Sessegnon and perhaps have Leno, who's obviously almost guaranteed to start for Fulham and get 90, with, again, the same chance of a clean sheet as Sessegnon's got, and maybe have a Livramento or a Shah instead of Sessegnon, who, again, great minutes, not bad underlying attacking data. Shah in particular is a goal threat. So you might want to reverse that. Maybe that's something I look at doing later on in the week. But for now, I still quite like having Sessegnon as that upside punt in defence. Looking at the bench, Kirkez is kind of there just as the 5th defender. I don't expect to be starting him, but Man United will rotate. Bournemouth's defensive data has not been bad, although they have dropped off a cliff a little bit recently. But Kirkez in particular has been a standout player for them all season. I haven't owned him all season, so there's, again, maybe a little bit of romance there. I do want him on my bench if at all possible, but I don't realistically expect to start him, and Man United could score against Bournemouth, so I don't think he really factors in. Cucurella is someone that I could be tempted into starting. Everton don't score a lot of goals, although they have been better under Moyes. Cucurella has actually been doing very well from an attacking point of view for a long time now. I think he's got 4 in the league, but several goals elsewhere around Europe and in cups and all of those different things. His attacking threat is decent, and although Chelsea, I don't expect them to score 3 or 4 against Everton, I do expect them to score 1 or 2, and Cucurella has actually been one of their better attacking options recently down that left flank. So I do like him. Maybe not enough to start him ahead of Trent if I think he starts Aït-Nouri or Sessegnon, or perhaps a Newcastle defender instead. but I think he's good enough for me to include in the mix on a free hit. So there are different combinations I like here on a free hit with different goalkeepers from these same 3 or 4 sides and maybe different outfielders. But right now, I like the balance. I've got 3 promoted clubs that these players are going up against already. And then Trent is taking on a heavily rotated Spurs side who, again, aren't going to be focusing on this fixture whatsoever. Meanwhile, Liverpool are going to desperately care about it because they could win the league in front of their fans. So again, I think there's a bit of romance there. So that's my goalkeeper and defence at the moment. Let's move on to the midfield, and then we'll have a look at some of the alternative midfielders that haven't quite made it onto my free hit draft just yet. So I think the midfield is the position where I'm getting the most grief at the moment. I'm not really that certain on the exact 4 or 5 that I'm going to end up picking. I think there are a lot of very reasonable, very high upside options, and this could change still quite a lot. So I'll run through all of the midfield alternatives as well, because I wouldn't want to leave anyone out. But these are the 4 I currently have on my draft, starting with Salah, who, although some people are suggesting that maybe he's not a must-have on a free hit, he's still my preferred captain. I think the upside is there, and it doesn't take much for him to still get a haul. He's been a bit off of it recently. I think it's now 9 games without an open play goal, which will tempt people to maybe look elsewhere. But like I've already said, Liverpool are gunning for the league at home, at Anfield, against Spurs. Salah's not exactly dropped off a cliff or anything. He's still playing at a very high level. I think he's been a little bit unlucky at times. And against Leicester, again, although it is Leicester and they're a poor side, he got plenty of big chances. I think it was 3 big chances. He created a few as well. This is not a player that isn't playing for the badge, or he's just had a new contract and he's not really trying anymore. He's still going hard at it for 30 goals for the season and going for the all-time assist record as well. So I don't think any narrative is going to convince me that he's a bad option against Spurs, who will rotate, who've got one eye on the Europa League semi-final. Meanwhile, Liverpool could not be more motivated to win this game. So Salah for me is an absolute lock and probably going to be my captain. Even though I'm chasing rank, I still think he's the best option. After that, I've also gone with Luis Diaz, whose minutes recently have actually been very good. But if anything was going to put me off of Diaz, it was maybe the line of thinking that he might get brought off early, because we know Slot likes an early sub. And we saw it this week. I think it was it Jota or Gakpo? I think Gakpo came off 59th minute for Jota. And again, it's just something at the back of my mind making me think, what if that happened to Diaz? But Diaz has been trusted more often than not this season. I think he's still very much in Slot's preferred 11, the strongest 11, and considering they don't have midweek fixtures, they've got no other competitions they're fighting for, I can't see why Slot would change it up and not start Diaz against Spurs. So there is a risk there. That might be a position that I end up changing. But right now, I want to attack that fixture. I think it's a great fixture to be attacked. Spurs' defensive data is poor, even when they don't rotate, let alone in this fixture where you would expect that they're putting in a second string 11, or even if they play their best 11, they're going to have one eye on not getting injured, on being fully fresh for the Europa League semi-final. So I still think it's a great fixture to go all guns blazing on a Liverpool attack for. So I'd like that double up if at all possible. And if I'm convinced that Diaz starts, I've got one eye on Jota in case that we think his expected minutes are looking good for game week 34. But right now, I currently prefer Diaz. Harvey Barnes is another one that is a bit of a risk. And although his minutes recently have been very good, and he's also been in sensational form, I am a little bit worried that now Gordon is back and Murphy's playing really well on the right wing, that Barnes' minutes might just drop a tad. And although it's Ipswich, it's a great fixture and I do want to target it, I'm possibly just a little bit concerned that Barnes could be the one that gets brought off early. I think he probably still starts the game considering the form he's been in, but would it shock me if he came off after 65, 70 minutes? Not particularly. Although that could easily just be Murphy on the right wing and maybe Gordon comes on the left and Barnes switches to the right around about the 65th, 70th minute mark, which is what happened in game week 33. I guess the point here is that there are alternatives, and Howe/Tyndall, whoever's in the dugout, will have the option to bring on a Gordon maybe it's even Barnes as well who gets benched, by the way, for one fixture. We never know. But they've got those alternatives in the wing positions to make substitutes around the 60th, 70th minute mark. And again, because it's Ipswich, you'd expect the game to be relatively comfortable for them, so maybe they do use that option to rotate. That being said, he's currently in my free hit draft because I think the upside is unquestionably there. The data's very good. I think at 0.60 XGI per 90 for Barnes, it's always looked good. It's just been the minutes that have been a bit questionable. Whereas up until very recently, the minutes have been very, very strong, and he's also performing at a high level. Ipswich are a terrible defence, one of the 3 worst in the league at the moment. So you do want to target that fixture if at all possible. Murphy is a player that I've got on my normal standard side, but he is getting brought off early, and I would predict the same thing to happen again. So if I wanted to maybe try to take a bit of a gamble on anyone's minutes being high, it would probably be Barnes at the moment, that I think is going to be slightly better expected minutes than Murphy's or possibly Gordon's. So if I'm going for any Newcastle midfielder right now, it's probably Barnes. Moving across, Kluivert's the final one of the 4 on my current draft, but there are plenty of alternatives that I will talk about in a moment. I'm a bit surprised that he came straight back in and played 90 after having, I think it was 3 game weeks out, but that proves to me that he is match fit and he can play again, especially because he's had a week break as well. So I don't think there's going to be too many doubts over whether he starts. And a bit like Spurs, Man United, you would expect, will rotate and have one eye on their Europa League semi-final in the midweek after game week 34. That could be a massive opportunity for Bournemouth to really put down a statement win against Man United, who won't be fully focused on it, whereas Bournemouth absolutely will be. Kluivert's data across the season has been great. The minutes have been good, and he's on penalties as well. So at the price point, I think he's down to 6.1, maybe even 6.0. He's very easy to get on a free hit draft. I think he'll be popular on a lot of drafts that you see this week, and those are the reasons. But he's not an absolute lock either. And I'd say outside of Salah, those 3 other midfielders, Diaz, Barnes and Kluivert, could arguably all be rotated for another one of the players that I've got in my alternatives category. The other one that they could easily come out for is Mbeumo, who, although it's maybe a little bit reactive because he's just returned an 18-pointer, the data has been consistently very, very good all season. He's been one of the best midfielders to have in the game. I think he's second in terms of the points. He's over the 200-point barrier now. For someone at his price point, in a team like Brentford as well, that is seriously impressive. And he always gets 90 minutes. So against Nottingham Forest, you'd expect nothing else. And if it's 65 minutes of Barnes versus 90 minutes of Mbeumo, I think I back Mbeumo, considering the data matches that of Barnes. It's a worse fixture, sure, but he gets almost 50% more minutes, potentially. Now, again, I've got Barnes in my starting lineup because I think maybe he stretches the minutes a little bit further. He gets something like 75, 80 minutes. But if I think that the minutes are a bit shaky on Barnes, then Mbeumo is a great alternative. Not the best fixture in the world, although Nottingham Forest defensive data has, again, not been brilliant recently. So Mbeumo's just one of those steady Eddie picks that you can pick any week and you can always expect him to do fairly well because he's almost guaranteed 90 minutes and penalties every single match. So that's the 5 midfielders at the moment, and Mbeumo on the bench, of course, but there's loads of alternatives. So let's take a look at some of the ones that are definitely in my consideration ahead of game week 34. Okay, so top of the billing that hasn't made it into my free hit draft, but is still in my consideration despite his recent form, is Cole Palmer. 10.6 million is a lot to spend on a midfielder who hasn't had a double-digit return. Cast your mind back, I think it's game week 21 was the last time he got a double-digit return. He hasn't scored in the league in a very long time either. I think that was the week he actually last scored in the league as well. It's closing in on 100 days since he last scored a Premier League goal. And the data's getting worse week on week as well. Now, I don't know exactly what's going wrong with Chelsea, and I've watched quite a lot of their matches recently, just anecdotally, because I want to see what might be going wrong. And it's not necessarily any one player's fault. I don't think Palmer has been rubbish, but what I do think is it's just not quite clicking as a unit right now, and maybe they're just a little bit predictable, and teams have maybe figured out the system. And this happened a little bit with Maresca last year in the Championship with Leicester, where for the first half of the year, and as again, a Southampton fan here, I can tell you that this is how we perceived it as well. They were almost unplayable for half of the championship season. But towards the back end of the season, the system maybe lacked a little bit of imagination. Possibly that's harsh, but that's at least how it seemed from the outside point of view. And we were, as other teams in the championship, able to maybe just figure them out a little bit. And maybe that is what's happening with Chelsea now as well, where their patterns of play, their build up in attack is maybe just a little bit too predictable. And players are losing confidence as well a little bit. And that definitely includes Palmer. So Palmer is a very expensive player to have on a free hit when he's going to be going up against a low block Everton side who have been decent defensively, much better since Moyes came in. And Palmer's just not looking confident either. So I think if I did go with him, it would be for the reasons that are consistently very good for Palmer. He's got good data. It's still up above most of the other midfielders I'm considering, bar Salah. So he's still got that. He usually gets 90 minutes a match. He's on penalties. He's on some set pieces. And he's still a very talented player. So I wouldn't rule him out of a free hit draft. And he could sneak in there, because maybe I get a bit scared off of not going with him on the free hit. But right now, I do kind of think that there's an opportunity to go against him, considering some of the cheaper alternatives that are in a bit better form and are also getting very good minutes with better fixtures as well. I just don't see Everton being a fixture in which Chelsea score bags and bags and bags of goals. Now, obviously, knowing the way that some of my predictions have gone recently, they probably will now go and score 6 or 7 against Everton. It'll be a watershed moment for Palmer and he'll get a hat-trick. But I think, again, you're just playing the odds. He hasn't looked himself recently. Chelsea are maybe a little bit predictable at the moment. And Everton being a very rigid and very disciplined defence, I can see Chelsea struggling to break them down a little bit. So right now, Palmer's not in for me, but he is still a good option. After that, Murphy's another one who, again, has been a darling of FPL managers as of late, especially me as well. Got plenty of points out of him. The data's been getting better and better week on week, up to almost 0.5 XGI per 90. And of course, a great fixture against Ipswich. But those expected minutes are just not fantastic. He's consistently getting 60 to 70 minute substitutions, and he's been in great form recently. But how long can that continue when you're only getting 60 to 70 minutes a match? And I think, although the data's good, I don't think it's so good that Murphy beats someone like maybe a Fernandes or a Bowen or an Mbermo when they're getting 90 minutes a match, 50% more minutes up to, at least, when Murphy's getting taken off earlier and maybe doesn't have the opportunity to go quite as big as some of these alternatives. Now, that's all to say that he's still been returning really well on limited minutes, so he's not a bad option whatsoever, and he could easily get a couple of goals against Ipswich. No one is saying that that's impossible. But again, on a free hit, I want to maximize the amount of minutes on the pitch for all of my players. And Murphy, if he only gets 60 to 70, it does limit the upside ever so slightly, even though it's a good fixture. So at the moment, I've got Barnes in ahead of him because he's got better underlying attacking data, and I expect the minutes to be a shade better than Murphy's. But if you're struggling for budget or you want to be really bullish on the Newcastle attack, possibly both of them, or Murphy in particular as a budget option is still very good. He's very highly owned as well at the moment, so if you're not on a free hit, absolutely hold on to him. And if I don't go with him, he could do a lot of damage to my rank as well. So there is that consideration. After that, you've got two penalty takers, Fernandes and Bowen. Fernandes, I've been maybe spooked off of a little bit because he didn't play or didn't start in game week 33. And I do worry that maybe that's going to be the case with Bournemouth as well. I think maybe 8 times out of 10, he probably starts that game and it's fine. And he just was a little bit tired after the Europa League's quarterfinal in the midweek before game week 33. But I've just got that little nagging doubt now. And because they've got such a big semi-final in the midweek after game week 34, I wouldn't be massively shocked if he either rested that game against Bournemouth or got brought off early. And considering he's 8.5 million, maybe it's just one that I swerve for now. He was in my very, very initial free hit draft when I first loaded up the page when FPL was back and I could pick my first draft. He was in. But when I saw he was benched against Wolves, I think it was Wolves, and only came on for a few minutes at the end, that maybe just put me off of him slightly. Bowen is another one that isn't far off of my draft at the moment. And again, this morning, he was actually still sat there. I've swapped out Bowen for Barnes at time of recording because I like the upside of Barnes. But Bowen, again, is a 90-minute man. He might get penalties as well. It's not for certain, but there's a chance he does take some penalties. And Brighton haven't been in great form themselves recently either. So maybe he's another player that is a little bit more of a steady Eddie pick, like an Mbeumo, that you can rely on to get you good minutes and decent underlying attacking data in pretty much any game week. And it's not a risk with Bowen. With most other players that I've got, there's at least a risk. With Bowen, there's very, very minimal risk. So again, if I was feeling a little bit boring, then Bowen maybe is a player that I would have ahead of someone like a Barnes, whose expected minutes might not be quite as good as Bowen's. He's not on penalties. Bowen does tick those boxes. Three other ones I want to quickly run through. Semenyo as an alternative to Kluivert. Semenyo's minutes do tend to be slightly better than Kluivert's. He tends to stay on longer. So you've got that. You've also got the fact that he's a little bit cheaper. And he does have a good shot volume as well. He gets off a lot of shots. That to say, though, the shot quality is a little bit lower in terms of the XG per shot. Kluivert does get a lot more big chances. Semenyo tends to just let loose whenever he sees an opportunity to shoot. So there's a lot of lower XG shots. But again, if you've got loads of shots, you've got the potential at least for loads of goals. So if he gets lucky in any given game week, the upside is there and it's a good fixture against Man United, as I've already discussed. So Semenyo, I wouldn't rule it out. If you're looking at being differential and you're chasing ranks, Semenyo could be one of those big explosions that happen once or twice a season. And most weeks he ticks along just fine. But if he does have the shot volume that we've seen earlier on in the season, he could get up to 2 or 3 goals in a single game week. And maybe it's just tickets in the raffle with those shots. Manetzi and Matoma. Manetzi's that cheaper option I don't mind, and it's definitely a fixture targeting kind of thing. I probably wouldn't be going there with any Wolves midfielder right now, if I'm honest. I think there's much more value up front, which we'll discuss in a moment's time. But Manetzi, maybe again, is a nice differential to have. He's cheap. The data's not bad. It's obviously a great fixture. If you're really chasing rank, might not be the worst option. I think for me personally, there's 7 or 8 options out there that I prefer ahead of him. So he probably won't be sneaking in for me. But again, if you want to be differential, you could look at him, or you could look at a Brighton midfielder like a Matoma, like a Minte possibly, if you want, again, to target a decent looking fixture in West Ham. They've dropped off a little bit recently. They looked okay under Potter to begin with, but they do look a little bit lost right now. So again, maybe not a fixture that I would mind targeting from an attacking point of view. Although I do expect West Ham to maybe put up a little bit of a fight in terms of them scoring goals. So Bowen, I still think, is a good option against Brighton. Right, so rounding off my 15 at the moment, my 3 strikers are as follows. Isak is in almost every draft. He has dropped off a little bit recently in terms of underlying attacking data, but it is Ipswich. He is a phenomenal FPL asset, and he's on penalties. He gets good minutes. The data, although it's dropped off a little, is still good. It would take a very, very brave person to go against Isak in the form he's been in across the season. Even though it's maybe a little bit of a dry spell recently, he's still not been poor in terms of FPL outcome. So he's going nowhere on a draft for me. Absolutely locked in as my first of the 3 forwards. Cunha is more interesting. I think, again, he naturally fits into most drafts right now. And Leicester at home, again, fantastic fixture. We've said all season, if Cunha gets any attacking returns, because he's the linchpin, because he's so creative as well, he's almost guaranteed bonus points alongside the goal or the assist that he gets. So again, there's definite upside there. Leicester have been poor. I would like to target them defensively if at all possible. So Cunha is a natural player to be bringing in. That being said, Strand Larsen's been in great form recently, and I think it really hangs on whether Bellegarde's fit or not, weirdly, because Bellegarde missed out, I think, the last game, and there's a few Wolves fans out there that are saying that Cunha didn't exactly cover himself in glory in the most recent match against Man United, and possibly because he's got that release clause, because he's in the shop window now, and Wolves aren't really fighting for anything, what's really the point in playing him for 90 minutes week in, week out, if they can look to the future, use Strand Larsen as that standalone striker, put in Bellegarde if he's fit, and maybe look towards building a team that will work for the future seasons, whereas Cunha is almost certainly not going to be there. That being said, Bellegarde isn't injured out. Cunha did start in game week 33 and got an assist. And I think, did he get bonus points alongside it? If not, it's very rare that he doesn't. So he's still a very good option. I just wonder if there's an opportunity maybe to go against him, maybe go for a Strand Larsen if you still want to target Leicester. If there's a chance that Cunha is, for whatever reason, benched, he's definitely their best player. So it would be a little bit odd to bench him. But for all the reasons I've just mentioned, it wouldn't massively shock me if they did try something against an already relegated Leicester side where they may be able to experiment a little bit and look towards the future. That might be in the back of their minds. So Cunha is in my draft at the moment because he's a great attacking option against Leicester, good underlying attacking data on penalties, on set pieces, and of course gets the bonus points with almost every return he gets. But there is just that asterisk there that makes me wonder, is there an opportunity to go with a Strand Larsen or maybe one of the other alternatives that I'll talk about in a moment's time? Now, Welbeck's another one that went straight into my free hit draft immediately as that third attacker. Initially, he was on my bench, but now João Pedro is out with the red card. Welbeck's minutes just skyrocket. He should get 90 minutes in this game week, you would think, unless there's an injury, unless there's some sort of issue that he's dealing with. And with the fact that João Pedro's out, Welbeck becomes more talismanic. He should be on penalties as well. And again, West Ham, defensively at least, haven't been brilliant, whereas Brighton going forward have created a lot of chances. So Welbeck, for me, I think at his price point is a fantastic option with all of the different box ticks that you can ask for in a striker, good data on penalties, good minutes expected in this game week at the very least. So for me, he's currently in. But with both Cunha and Welbeck, I think there's at least a question mark as to whether or not they're locks. And so I think it's worth looking at some of the alternatives because there are, again, a lot of forward options that you could very easily make a good argument for including on a free hit draft. Right then, so on to the final section, which will be the alternative forwards that I could include on the free hit. There are 6 other options outside of the 3 that I've already talked about that I am still weighing up the pros and the cons for. Starting off with Chris Wood, who's obviously had a fantastic season, but he's just come back. And ever since coming back, he hasn't actually looked in that good a nick either. So I think he's maybe one that a few people will include as a legacy pick. And don't get me wrong, he could easily do well against a fairly porous Brentford defence. But I don't think he's a player that I'm highly considering right now. I think there are better alternatives for me, especially because I'm chasing rank. The data isn't fantastic. In fact, it's the second worst out of all of these alternatives that I'm looking at. Obviously, he's massively overperforming the data and he's a highly intelligent, high quality striker. So nothing to stop him scoring 1 or 2, maybe even a hat trick against Brentford. But again, as always, I say it a lot, I'm playing the odds here. And if he's got a low shot volume, Nottingham Forest haven't been in great form either recently, nor has Chris Wood since coming back from injury. I think he's a player that maybe I'm going to look at going against. After that, Evan Nilsson's a player I'm definitely considering. Good underlying data, much better than Woods, 0.59. He shouldn't have the benefit of penalties, which is a little bit frustrating, but he's cheaper, 5.8 million, and you could make a good argument to include him over someone like a Welbeck. And those were 2 positions that I was weighing up between Evan Nilsson or Welbeck on my initial free hit draft. I do like him a lot. But do I want to double up on Bournemouth, who've not been in great form recently, even though it's against, you would assume, fairly rotated Man United side who won't be concentrating on the fixture? I think for me, it's probably going to be either Evan Nilsson or Cliver, probably not both. Now, their data is almost perfectly aligned, 0.59, 0.6 XGI per 90, so not much between them there. Cliver does have the benefit of penalties, though, so I think I'm slightly edging towards Cliver right now, but I do like Evan Nilsson, and if I didn't have Cliver, I might be tempted to have Evan Nilsson ahead of someone like a Welbeck. After that, I've talked about Cunha. Strand Larsen has been in great form. The data's not quite as good, but he has been talismanic with Cunha out for a little while. Again, very cheap, 5.4 million, and will be a differential on the draft. I think most people will have Cunha when it comes to free hit 34. If you're chasing, Strand Larsen should also start. His data recently has been exceptional. In I think 2 of the most recent game weeks, he's had over 1 XG created. And again, a fantastic fixture against Leicester. So if you want to be differential, if you're chasing a little bit, then maybe Strand Larsen is a way of maybe changing up your 11 just that slight bit against those who are mostly going to be going for Cunha. And as I said, maybe there's a little bit of a doubt over Cunha as well. And maybe you get a little bit lucky if Bellegarde's back and they choose to do something a little bit wild and bench Cunha again. It's unlikely it happens, but it's not impossible. So again, if you're looking to maybe gain rank on someone who's maybe 20, 30 points ahead of you, also on a free hit, that might be one of those maybe decisions that you can make to differentiate yourself from your rivals. Moving down, 3 other options that I'll talk about quickly. Raul Jimenez. If Muniz, who is currently injured, is still a doubt going into game week 34, Raul Jimenez's minutes should go up. I think the problem with picking him normally, same goes for Muniz, by the way, is they directly compete with each other. They very rarely play on the pitch at the same time. So neither striker is ever very good for a 90-minute performance. And Muniz has been great this season as well at times. So if both are fit, I think it rules both of them out of the free hit draft, because they'll probably get, one of them will start, but we don't know which one. And they'll probably get around 60, 65 minutes for one of them. And then the other will get the final 30, 25 minutes. Although it's Southampton, although the data's good, it's too risky for me unless I get confirmation that Muniz is definitely out. If that's the case, Raul Jimenez, again, another nice, cheap differential forward on penalties, and the expected minutes would be very good if his competitor for that position, Muniz, is indeed out. So one to keep an eye on, but not good enough for a free hit draft for me right now, considering there's doubt over whether Muniz is available or not. Jackson's data over the season is very good, 0.60, but he is a bit more expensive. And like I said with Cole Palmer, Everton don't appear to be that easy to break down. Chelsea have been a little bit predictable in their build-up play, so I think the upside is limited on Jackson. But the data is the best, actually, that's a lie, second best, only slightly to the next player I'll talk about on this graphic. So again, an alternative that might be a really nice differential if you think that they can break down Everton's defence fairly early on and make hay whilst the sun shines. Finally, Wissa. Now, because I've not included Mbeumo in my starting 11 at the moment, it's pretty hard to make an argument to include Wissa, who does have very comparable data, but not the benefit of penalties that Mbeumo has. And of course, doesn't get the extra point for the goal, extra point for the clean sheet. So I think Wissa is, again, a bit of a differential that most people won't go for, especially if they go for Mbeumo, because it's not an easy fixture away at Nottingham Forest on paper. But would it be the craziest thing in the world if Brentford score 2 or 3 goals against them? I wouldn't be massively shocked. And since Wissa and Mbeumo have such a good relationship, since they score the overwhelming majority of their goals and the assists as well, you could maybe do something a little bit funky, target that fixture, and who knows, you only need one thing to go your way if you are going to get a haul out of both of them, because they tend to set each other up. And if there are goals, let's say 2 or 3 goals for Brentford against Nottingham Forest, I'd probably bank on the fact that 3, maybe 4 of the returns are from Wissa and Mbeumo, between the goals and the assists, of course. So Wissa at 6.5 million, the best data out of all of these options, by the way. The minutes have been very good, gets a lot of very big chances, and Nottingham Forest defence hasn't been great recently either. So maybe a tasty differential there as well. These 6 are all in my consideration. I think out of these 6, if 1 or 2 were to make it in right now, it would probably be Evan Nilsson and Strand Larsen. But I'm not completely ruling out the likes of Raul Jimenez if we get word on Muniz being out. And Wissa as well might be a tasty differential as well if I don't start with Mbeumo, or maybe even double up and back Brentford to have a good day against Nottingham Forest away from home. Right then, so we've reached the end of the video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you're at the moment if you are free hitting ahead of game week 34. Let me know what you think of my draft. There are a few maybe punty players in there as well, like Trent, like Barnes, maybe like Welbeck as well, that maybe you don't like. And I'd love to debate and discuss those options in the comments with you as well as the alternatives. Is there anyone I've forgotten to mention that you think would be a great option? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'm very open at the moment. I'll definitely be making another video later on in the week as I try to lock in on my free hit 34 draft. But As it stands, I'm pretty happy with this one. I think a lot of the routes are covered off. Triple Liverpool at home to Spurs. Lots of promoted sides being targeted there. I've got triple Newcastle against Ipswich. Double Wolves against Leicester. One Fulham against Southampton. Maybe I could add another Fulham player there. But Man United's being targeted. Spurs is being targeted. West Ham's being targeted. Lots of home fixtures. I think 10 out of 11 home fixtures there as well. I quite like it. But again, let me know in the comments below what you think of it and how your free hit is shaping up as well. And as always, if you've enjoyed today's video, leave a like, hit subscribe. It would be massively appreciated. And I'll see you later on this week as we start trying to lock in my draft ahead of game week 34.